Hello everyone, this is Mr. Brian and I'm here for a teen science activity. Today what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be making an articulated hand. Now to start with, what we need to have is a piece of cardstock, and I've got a pen here. You can use a pencil if you want. And what we're going to do is we're going to trace our hand. Now I mainly write with my right hand, so I'm going to be tracing my left hand. Just work with whatever you want to do as far as your dominant hand, or if you want to do both. I will say that as you go around and trace your hand, make sure that you make notice of where the joints are in your finger, because this will be what we will fold to be our articulation points. So as I go around and trace my hand, I'm going to make a little notation about wherever a joint is on my finger, and that's going to help make the actual articulated hand. So I'll go ahead and I will get started here and trace my hand. And you want to make sure that you trace down past to get your wrist as this as well. So I'm going to set my hand here to where it's fairly straight. Just work yours around to where it will best fit on the paper, but you definitely want to have a little piece here that will connect to your wrist. You'll see why here in a little bit. Now I am only making the notation of where the joints are on one side of my finger, because I can draw that around to the other side after I've finished going around the whole hand. Okay, so now I'm going to take my pen, and where I saw my notations were for my joints, I'm going to draw that line across the finger. Making sure to also remember where the finger meets the hand. Okay, once you've done this, we're going to get a pair of scissors and we're going to cut out the hand. As you cut out your hand, you can do your best. It doesn't matter if you stay on the inside or the outside of the line. I really think that for me, I like to try to stay, for this particular activity, slightly outside the line, but that's really just personal preference. Okay, so here's our cutout hand. Now the next thing that we need to do with our hand is we need to go back to where we see all of our lines here, and we're going to need to go ahead and we're going to need to fold our cardstock down on that and give it a slight crease, not a super heavy crease, but just enough that it has a crease on it. That way, as we add the bones and the ligaments or tendons to our articulated hand, that it will be able to move a little bit more freely than if we didn't make the folds at all. We have to go through and do this for each of the little segments. Okay, now for our bones, what we're going to use is we're going to use pieces of straw. Now you could use your typical little drinking straw like what you have here. This one happens to have a bendy neck. I prefer the clear plastic straws that you can get from a restaurant. The ones that I'm using today come from our local movie theater here. And what we have to do in order to make our bone, what we're going to have is we're going to cut a piece of straw that is going to fit inside of each segment. So it's going to be, you'll have to put this down, you'll have to look at it, kind of measure down, cut for that one, then do for the next segment, and so on and so forth, all the way for each of your fingers as you're heading down. Then also, since you know our hands have bones in them all the way down. We'll also have to do a longer piece of straw bone down here as part of the palm that is going to connect to a larger bone down here at the wrist. And for the larger bone at the wrist, we're going to use a smoothie straw. This is one I've cut the piece from already, and you'll see why this one is so much larger here in a little bit. Now, to connect your pieces of bone, you could use some Scotch tape like what I have here and just kind of carefully go around. I think they'll be faster, and if you're super careful as you go through and do this, today we're going to use a hot glue gun. So, I'd also recommend not cutting all the pieces for your hand all at the same time, because then you may get the segments mixed up for your fingers. This is definitely something that you're going to need to do one finger at a time. So I'm going to cut this up and we'll get this thing ready to go. So I'm going to turn my hand here so I can get a better look at what I'm doing. Now the other thing too, with your top section, you want to make sure that the straw piece goes almost all the way up to the very tip top of the finger joint, not being halfway down here, because then you won't have the full articulation here at the end. We want to have it go all the way up to the top part of the joint to allow for maximum mobility. And this time, this is definitely something that you want to cut inside the lines for. When you glue your or tape your pieces to your hand, you want to try to get it in the middle part of the finger. You also want to make sure as you put these on here that you keep your straw pieces lined up, because what we'll be doing is we'll be feeding our tendons or ligaments down through our straw pieces, and so if they're not all lined up together, it's going to be harder for you to feed that piece through the finger, and then just continue on with your other segments. I don't know why I gave this finger an extra joint. I noticed that as I was drawing it. I didn't fold the joint, but I did notice, I'm like, why is there an extra joint here? Okay, now that we've got our bone pieces on each of the fingers, we're going to put our bone pieces here in our hand or our palm, basically. What we're going to do is take another straw. This time it's going to be a little bit longer because we want to just come from part of the palm down to where it'll meet with the wrist. So just want to kind of angle it back to where I'll have things going straight. And just like what we did with the fingers, we want to make sure that as we put these down, that they are maintaining and still lined up with the finger that it is coming from. And these will be different sizes as well. And again, I will be fastening these with hot glue. You don't want to come down with these past the end of the palm. Really, we're going to want to end it probably right around here. Would be a good ending spot. So I may go ahead and give myself a little dot for reference. So I don't want to go any further down than this, but I'm not going to angle it toward the dot. That's just letting me know that if I cut my straw past my dot, I've gone too far. Really, I'm probably going to cut it a little bit above the dot for these pieces. And again, just work your way around your hand, and remember as you're placing these to allow space so you're not overlapping them on top of each other. You may find as you measure your pieces that you have to make some adjustments to keep things from overlapping, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, now that we've got our metacarpals and our phalanges glued down to our hand, we need to add our carpal, or our wrist bone. So this is going to be what we're going to use our smoothie straw for. Once again, we want to have a piece and cut it where it will come down to the wrist, not connect all the way up here. This should be about a good length for me. So we'll cut this, and once again we will hot glue this down. Okay, now we're going to need to make our ligaments or our tendons that's going to allow for the actual articulation. So what we're going to do is, I have here just some normal cotton twine, and what we're going to do is we're going to pull off a nice long length of it, because what we have to do is we're going to have to feed this down through each of our sections, and after we do, we have to make sure it also gets fed through our carpal, and then we'll have enough room of the string down here at the bottom, so once we get everything all threaded nicely together, that we can have the length that we will be able to pull. Now, as you're going about doing this, you want to make sure that you don't just stop it here at the top of the finger. What's best to do is to turn it over and tape or hot glue, however you want to fasten your string to the full back part of the top joint. That way, that can give us a good sturdy anchor point as we continue when we work our way down through everything else. Now, if you wanted to add more articulation to your hand, you could repeat the process that we did here, but on the back with the straws. But just for our proof of concept model here today, I'm only going to do it on the one side. So I'm going to hold this back here, then I'm going to pull it over the top, and stretch it down to where I can see that I'll have a good amount. That looks about right. So I will cut this, and I'll get this fed through, and we will tape it. Okay, now to make it easier for you to feed the straw through your phalanges, and your metacarpals and the carpal, what I would recommend is you have either like a thread needle or some other form of sciencey word here, pointy stick. In this case, I have bamboo skewers of various lengths. Sometimes with this, I like to use the long one, and sometimes it's better just to use one of the shorter ones where we have a little bit more control. And so what you need to do is we're going to take the string. I've got some tape here. And we're going to tape this to the back of the finger. I made my piece a little bit longer so I could come back and add a little bit more reinforcement here. And then what I'm going to do is just take a teeny bit more, and I'm going to take the other end of the string to my pointy stick. Then we can take it and we'll thread it through. Now in order for it to fit, you may have to hold the string against whatever you're using to thread it through, but then everything should just fit on its way through. I'll pull through this way, and then we will come down here, and then you can detach this end part of the string from the end of your pointy stick. And then you can see here, as I have it on here, now that we have a finger with a tendon or ligament, that as you pull on it, you can see that it will move. And then of course, judging on how well that you made a good firm and heavy crease as you're putting these on, and if your straw pieces are the correct length for your segments, that will depend on how much movement that you get. And so now we're just going to continue this process on the other 4 fingers. Don't be discouraged if it pops off. You can always retape and continue threading. Okay, now once you've got all of your tendons, string all listed in here, you'll see that my strings are all different lengths. Now if you want to, you can trim them. I like to leave them the different lengths because that helps me remember which finger that they are attached to. So I'm gonna leave mine how it is like this, and then it's just a matter of finding like, okay, this one controls the thumb, or oh, this one controls the ring finger. Now I've got another one I want to show you guys that I've made. This one is a little bit more articulated as I move through, so you can see that I can bring this one up almost into a fist, and then as we set things down. But this one was made just in the same process as this one. And again, you can see that I have different lengths for the end to try to help me remember which one of these controls which of the fingers. But if you want to trim them, I have them all be the same length. It's up to you. And again, if you want to add even more articulation, you can repeat the same process of what we did here on the front, on the back part. You would just have to replicate all of this completely, including adding another piece of a smoothie straw on this side, then you'd have even more strings and things to pull. But I hope you guys enjoyed making this articulated hand, and we'll see you guys in the next video.